Car crash cases, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse across the state of Alabama. The attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts. The attorneys with Josh Wright from the law firm of Hollis, Wright, and host David Lamb.
And welcome into the attorneys. Thank you so much for joining us on this Sunday evening. For the next half hour, we have a panel of experts ready to deal with the topic that we believe is pertinent and of interest to you, and would love to have you be a part of the conversation. All you have to do so is take advantage of the information at the bottom of your screen, ways that you can join our conversation. Also a reminder, an attorney is standing by live right now to speak with you, so an extra bonus, an opportunity there to get some free legal advice. Leading our conversation from the firm of Hollis Wright, Josh Wright. Good to see you, sir.
You too. Hope you had a great week, Dave.
I did. Thank you.
So, we're doing an interesting topic today. We're going to be talking about those things called common carrier suits, where you're being hauled around on a cruise ship or a bus or a taxi cab or an airplane, and kind of what your rights are in circumstances where things don't go as planned.
Right.
We're also going to be talking about some travel-related issues and how to handle things if you've been injured or there's been a problem related to some travel that you've taken. And we're kind of in that season still.
We are.
Where although summer's winded up, it's now time to kind of move into the fall, and people are going to be traveling for football games and other things. So it's kind of a pertinent timing, I think, for this show. John Spade with our law firm, as you well know, has done a great job. He works on some of these cases, does a great job, so we're glad to have you on the show.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Let's talk in general just for a minute about kind of this concept of what a common carrier is and how their duty to protect you is heightened compared to if I'm driving in your car on the way home tonight.
Absolutely. As you mentioned kind of earlier, common carriers are taxi cab drivers, buses, airplanes, and basically they're any business that opens themselves up to the public to transport both people and goods from one point to another for a fee. Now, all people, you have to operate with a certain duty of care, but common carriers, because they are in charge of, and their business is transporting and trusting your goods and people's lives, they have a heightened duty of care that they have to follow. And in fact, it's called the utmost duty of care. And when they breach that heightened duty of care and you're subsequently injured or your goods are damaged, that's where liability attaches, and that's where the suits kind of pick up from.
We end up handling a lot of these cases, and in Alabama, we've done a lot of shows on car insurance and the law associated with being injured in an accident involving a vehicle or a truck. And there's this concept called the guest passenger statute. The guest passenger statute in general says if you and I are riding in a vehicle today and you cause an accident, you're driving and I'm a passenger, I can't bring suit against you for my injuries or against your insurance unless you acted wantonly.
Okay.
If you were simply negligent, I can't bring a suit against you. It's an old law that has never died in Alabama and has always been the law in Alabama. And so a lot of times people will call and say, well, I was involved in this accident and I think it was simply an accident, and maybe just, it wasn't negligence, it was just a total mistake. And we have to advise people that you may not have a cause of action. You may have to go after your own insurance, your own uninsured motorist coverage or some other form of coverage, because you can't bring suit against that individual because of the guest passenger statute. In these cases, it's unique, because if you're paying somebody to carry you, whether it's a taxi, whether it's a cruise ship, whatever it may be, the guest passenger statute does not apply. So it creates not only a heightened standard and duty, as John mentioned, it also involves a totally different area of the law and impacts one of the defenses that general carriers would have. So common carrier can change things significantly. Where do you see a lot of these cases? I mean, are they in buses and cruise ships? I mean, where do you normally see them?
Kind of all over the place. Some taxi cabs, some a lot of times cruise ships. Everything going down out of Mobile with Carnival. That's been a big one, a big hot topic kind of lately. But then also sometimes in amusement parks. and then also in some buses and airplanes as well.
So, the statute of limitations is a little different in these cases sometimes compared to what we normally would have in a negligence suit against another individual. What do you see related to that?
Well, it kind of depends, because the statute of limitations in a personal injury aspect is going to be determined by where the injury occurs. So like in the state of Alabama, for a personal injury cause of action, you have 2 years. The statute of limitations is 2 years. So you have 2 years to bring a cause of action, or you'll forever be barred from doing so. Now, when these types of situations come up on, say, cruise ships will, they'll be in, sometimes foreign waters. So it's going to really dependent on where the accident and the injury occurred as to what the statute of limitations is. And also, in a lot of these situations, you'll run into a kind of unique caveat that you won't see typically in a general personal injury accident, and that will be a notice of claim that has to be filed. So there'll be a time period which will be much shorter than the statute of limitations, usually a few months, 6 months, or maybe a year, in which you have to actually give written notice to the common carrier, to the cruise ship, the taxi cab company, the airplane company, whoever it may be, and putting them on notice that you are going to be asserting a claim. And if you don't comply with that notice of claim time frame and give them written notice, then your claim could also be barred. So
if you've been involved in an event, whether it be with a taxi, a bus, airplane, whatever, you recommend getting to a lawyer quickly just to make sure that your statute's protected?
Absolutely.
Or your notice of claim is protected?
Absolutely, because it can vary so much. And there's no real kind of one size fits all. Even with, in Alabama, personal injury, you got 2 years to bring your statute, that's your time before it runs. But in other states around the country, it can be as much as 6 years. So it's really important to contact somebody, an attorney, quickly, just so that you can make sure that your rights are protected, that your cause of action, more importantly, is protected.
What about amusement parks?
Amusement parks are one of those where it's also good to contact an attorney, because many states throughout the nation are kind of split as to whether or not those classify as common carriers. All states say that they have to maintain their premises in a reasonably safe condition, and they owe all of the patrons to the parks a duty of care. But the question really comes down to whether or not they have to comply with that heightened, that utmost duty of care that common carriers are held to. Some states say yes, some states say no, which again is why it's important to contact an attorney who will be able to kind of sift through those legal issues for you.
I know we're getting ready to go to break. I was just going to mention, we've got a couple amusement park cases right now. I have a rule in my life, which is I don't ride a ride that is taken apart and put that together more times than there are weeks in the year. That's a rule. That I follow. So Six Flags, I will go to.
Right.
Traveling Carnival, not going to go there.
Not going to happen.
And I would recommend you probably don't go to. Hey, when we come back, one of the things I do want to talk about, though, is this show is not just going to deal with common carriers. It's going to talk a little bit about travel and potential injuries that you can have on vacations and whatnot. We're going to talk a little bit about pool safety. We've kind of acquired a practice group of pool safety expert lawyers. With the experts that we use in those cases. We've handled a bunch of those cases.
All right, we'll do that whenever we come back. As we head to break, a reminder of how you can get in touch with us here and join the conversation. Would love to have you do so. Also, want to let you know you can find out more about the firm of Hollis Wright on Facebook as well as Twitter. Facebook, just search the term Hollis Wright, and on Twitter, it is Hollis_Wright. Also, remember, an attorney standing by. Pick up the phone and call them now.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis Wright, a personal injury law firm. Thank you for watching The Attorneys. Now, we hope you, a friend, or a loved one never needs legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple. Provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free, so if you have questions specific to the show or related to other accident or injury-related topics, you can call, email, or text us. Or you can also follow us on Facebook or Twitter, or simply contact us by going to hollis-wright.com and click on the Contact Us link. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us watching The Attorneys.
Hit that party vote, knowing your rights, tonight on The Attorneys. Welcome back in. We'd love to have you join our conversation. How you can do so at the bottom of your screen. Please take advantage of those opportunities to speak with us. Let us know your questions, but also speak live with an attorney who is standing by. Josh?
Yeah, so when we went to break, we kind of let in that we were going to talk a little bit about pool safety too, because I know when we go on vacation, when we go to private residences that have pools, you go to Disney World, there are certain kind of rules and guidelines, if you will, with reference to pool safety, lake safety, that kind of thing. Just talk a little bit about that, and I can jump into, because I know it's a practice group as a law firm that we have.
Absolutely.
We handle a lot of these cases.
Well, there are various federal and state regulations that apply to both public pools and semi-public pools that lay out certain requirements that they must have. One that kind of comes to mind immediately is that they must have drain covers. So, all pools have drains that circulate the water to keep the pool clean, but that creates a sort of a suction effect that can happen by moving all that water. And so federal regulations and state regulations have come in and said they have to have a cover to prevent small children from, being sucked into those drains and to ultimately prevent drowning. That's kind of one regulation that pops to mind. They also have to have, certain rules posted that are visible to all the patrons. Not only telling the kids not to run around the pool and to kind of exercise some basic safety requirements, but also let them know whether or not there's a lifeguard on duty, and if there's not, that it's a swim at your own risk scenario. And in that same line, the pool is required to have certain safety equipment that's not only visible but also readily accessible to the patrons in case an incident does occur. Someone can act to prevent a serious injury.
You'd almost believe this guy's actually handled a pool safety case before.
He sounds like it.
He knows a little too much about that topic. I'll tell you a couple things that popped to mind with reference to this and traveling and whatnot. I mean, fences are required in and around pools to prevent small children from being able to get into a pool unattended by a parent. And that is an issue that we see a lot of times. The other issue we see is somebody will come to us and say, we've had this terrible event that's happened in our life, and we've handled a lot of these cases, and they're terrible events. They always are. When you deal with water and entertainment, bad things can happen. A lot of good things can happen too, but bad things can happen. And it's, they didn't have a lifeguard on duty. Well, there's not a responsibility and duty and obligation to have a lifeguard on duty. But let me say this, if you do have a lifeguard on duty, they have to be properly trained, and they got to follow certain rules to make sure that they are allowing people to take breaks, they're watching, they're paying attention, they're not playing on their phones. So there's a reason why you come to a lawyer in these cases. Pool safety is such a complicated area of the law that you've got to make sure that you have lawyers that have handled these cases, that understand these cases involved. One of the more recent things that I know John and I have talked off air about is kind of what happened down in Orlando at Walt Disney World. And that is a terrible tragedy of this young boy that was killed. And, as a lawyer, it is natural for you to listen to those facts and evaluate those facts on their face as to whether or not that amounts to a suit. Did somebody do something wrong? Is that a terrible tragedy? Should the child have ever been near this water? Should they have ever been in the water at night? And, you kind of look at that, and as a lawyer, you evaluate those facts. Well, that's just one example that made the press. Right. We see stuff like that all the time. And what I would recommend is if you've been involved in an event related to the pool, or you have a family member or a friend that has been involved, get involved with somebody, get a lawyer involved to at least evaluate the case and kind of tell you what you have. No question.
Absolutely.
And, we talked a little bit about the terrible thing that happened down in Orlando, and unfortunately it's stuff that we see all too often. Talk a little bit about travel to certain areas like national parks and immunity and how that works, because that can certainly impact whether someone has a claim.
Absolutely, and most most like the Talladega National Forest, they're not owned by an entity. They're normally owned by the state or the national government. So in that, they have certain immunities that are provided to the government that will prevent them from being sued. Now, there's always ways that you can find around that, but they are very difficult cases to bring because you have to show that there was some sort of a policy or procedure that was in place, and to get around that, you really do need the help of an attorney.
When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about travel insurance.
Okay.
You'll be amazed at some of the statistics as to how few people that travel even use travel insurance, and how important it can be at times, and inexpensive for that matter.
Yeah, I bet that. We'll tackle that topic whenever we come back as we head to break. A reminder of how you can join our conversation. Also, one more time, I want to let you know, a great resource you have, an attorney standing by right now to speak with you. We have a team of attorneys ready to take your call right now, so pick up the phone and take advantage of that opportunity. Stay tuned. The final segment of The Attorneys coming right up.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis, Wright. Now, we often hear the phrase burden of proof when it comes to civil or criminal lawsuits. It's the level of proof that a plaintiff must meet to win their case. But these burdens change whether you're in a civil or a criminal court. So in this week's Legal 4-in-1, we're answering the question, who holds the burden of proof and what is the burden in the case? Let's start with civil cases. Civil cases are brought by a plaintiff who claims they have been injured by some way by a defendant. Because there is no chance of jail time, since the injury does not amount to a crime, the burden of proof is not as difficult as in criminal cases. The level of proof here is called preponderance of the evidence. In general terms, that means the plaintiff must prove that it is more likely true than not true that the defendant is responsible for the plaintiff's injuries. You've seen the scales of justice before. Both parties have to fill those scales up with evidence to support their position. If the plaintiff can fill his scale up with just a bit more evidence than the defendant, the plaintiff wins the civil case and is entitled to a verdict. Now, the stakes are much higher in a criminal case than that of a civil case. That's because a criminal defendant could lose his freedom or even his life if he's found guilty. So who holds the burden of proof in a criminal case? Well, the state does, because the defendant is being accused of breaking state law. The state has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty. It's the heaviest burden in the justice system. The evidence has to be so convincing that the jury believes beyond any reasonable dispute the defendant is guilty. Probably guilty just isn't enough in these cases. The law requires the jury to find the defendant not guilty if there is any doubt at all. Please remember, your call, email, or text to the attorneys is free. All of us at Hollis Wright want to help answer your questions on real issues you face. Remember, a competent lawyer will respond to every question you send in. That's our pledge and promise to you. Thanks for watching The Attorneys.
Welcome back into The Attorneys. Some astounding facts we're learning tonight about travel and travel safety. If you have a question you would like to pass along to our panel of experts, take advantage to get in touch with us now. John.
You know, one of the things that we say as we come in and out from commercial that we don't really do a good job of promoting on the show, and my wife actually mentioned this to me the other day, is that we may handle a show like this related to travel-related issues, but our attorneys are truly standing by answering calls, emails, and texts every single show we've done for the last 5-6 years to provide free legal advice to folks if they're dealing with something else in their life, whether it's disability, Social Security, a workers' comp issue, a personal injury. And the thought always has been that the firm loves to help people answer questions that they need in their own life, right? Because a lot of times there's not a lawyer standing by to answer questions for free, and people are intimidated to pick up the phone thinking they're going to be charged for it. The service we provide is totally free, and as we say oftentimes, and we do it at our law firm a lot, you don't have to come to our law firm if you've got a personal injury case or something else that's a fit for us. Go to someone though, and if we can provide legal advice and get you to the right place and the right location, we're going to do that. So we don't say it enough. I think my wife made a good recommendation, and she said you need to start saying that on the show to let people know that we're here to answer questions if you've got them in your life for free, and you don't have to worry about someone's going to charge you here. We're going to answer those questions whether they come in a call, a text, an email, a Facebook, a Twitter, whatever it is. So I wanted to mention that.
A good question that we have is about travel insurance.
Yep.
Whether it's a good idea, is it always the right choice? Is it always recommended?
It kind of depends on the situation. You know, insurance is one of those things that everybody hates paying the premiums on, but when they need it, they need it. And travel insurance is one of those that's, you know, it's not really expensive on the front end, but it can save you a lot on the back end if something does happen. You know, one of those what if scenarios, you lose your luggage, you know, your flight gets canceled, gets delayed, anything goes wrong, that's what that travel insurance is there for. And it can really come in big, and you can buy different policies depending on the type of trip you're taking. Say you're going on a trip for, you know, several weeks where you're going to be on several planes, you can purchase what's called a multi-trip policy to insure all of those plane rides, for instance.
Okay.
Or if you're just going, you know, out to California and back, you can purchase travel insurance on that alone. And there's also, you know, you have the trip insurance and travel insurance. You also have what's called Medivac insurance. So say you're traveling to somewhere that's, you know, a little bit more remote, you know, in South America or you know, Africa, and you might be in a situation where you could be coming to a medical emergency and need to get out of there quickly. You can purchase this Medivac insurance, which actually allows you to get, it's insurance that allows you to get Medivac to a hospital that can get you the care you need in a timely manner. So,
you know, we use this personally. I don't know if you and I have talked. We had a concussion in our family on a ski trip this past spring. That was a pretty significant deal, something that we had never faced before. And dealing with the medical evac folks, dealing with EMS that was required as part of our family's event, they're not easy to deal with when you're out of town. That doesn't make them bad people and bad companies, but they're not generally going to be preferred providers with your traditional health insurance like the Blue Crosses of the world, which means that if the traditional health insurance company that you have pays $1,000, but your bill for the medical evac costs you $28,000, they can take the $1,000 from the Blue Cross folks, and then the medical evac company can still recover the full amount against you. So the number one cause of bankruptcy in this country right now happens to be medical related issues. This medical insurance is extremely inexpensive, and as John was saying, when you're traveling out of the country, use an example of Africa and a couple others, having that type of coverage to protect yourself, to fill the gap between your traditional insurance and what will be covered and the cost associated with that, given how inexpensive it is, it's probably not a bad idea to really consider it when you're traveling. A lot of times your travel agent can help you get that.
A question here about camp. Camps are really popular in the summertime. The question is, my children are going to camp. What is the camp's liability to keep them safe?
Well, the camp will have the similar liability that most apartment complexes will have, which is called premises liability. They have a duty to maintain their facilities and their grounds in a reasonably safe condition. So I mean they have a general duty to protect your children. But a lot of times with sending your kids off to camp, they're going to come in contact with staff and camp counselors.
Right.
So they'll have an added duty to do background checks on their staff and their members and check for any red flags that might come up, because they're going to be the ones that are kind of going to be overseeing your kids for the weekend, a week, 2 weeks, however long the camp might be. Right. But another thing for parents to kind of be on the lookout for is waivers of liability. And you'll send your kids around to a football camp or to some of these outdoor camps where they're going to be on ropes courses and rock climbing, whatever they might be doing. They'll ask you to sign a waiver of liability, which will actually reduce the camp's liability. So that's something to be on the lookout for when you're sending your kids away to camp.
Yeah, one of the things that we see most often in this concept of common carriers and travel-related issues is liability for common carriers operating a vehicle, whether it's a bus or some other type of transportation. And the things that you're going to be looking for and lawyers get involved and evaluate is going to be issues like were people operating over their hours of service, were people properly licensed and certified to be able to operate those vehicles, was there appropriate insurance, those types of things. So if you're involved in one of these events, you want to get with a lawyer and get with a lawyer quick to be able to evaluate the case.
We're just about out of time, less than 2 minutes remaining, but want to give both of you an opportunity to give a final thought.
You're going to be traveling a lot. It's a kind of what you do during the summer, during traveling for the holidays, go see friends. Be safe, be alert, use common sense out there. But also, if you do get into a situation, it's important to contact an attorney quickly, because depending on where the accident has occurred, your statute of limitations might change, and there's some various obstacles that you might be presented with that won't happen and won't arise in a normal personal injury accident that might arise if you're on a trip somewhere out of the country or in another state.
When we go to amusement parks, when we go on vacations, when we travel, we expect everything's going to go great, and we hope that it always does. In those circumstances, when it doesn't, there are people out there that can help evaluate and lead, guide, and direct you through the process of what to do. And our firm is here to provide that free legal advice to be able to assist people and help them understand what their rights are in circumstances where things don't exactly go as planned.
That's good advice. That's some good marriage advice too. Whenever your wife makes a recommendation.
Absolutely. You put it out there. I'm going to make sure she watches the show.
That's a bonus, right? You get it all right here on The Attorneys.
That's exactly
Thank you, gentlemen.
That's exactly
Appreciate
right.
you being with us. Thank you for joining us as well. It is our privilege to join you each and every Sunday night, so thank you for allowing us into your homes. As we wrap things up, here's how you can continue to get in touch with the firm of Hollis Wright. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time on The Attorneys.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.